South African Revenue Service, or SARS, recently revealed that 63% of all companies that were awarded personal protective equipment or PPE tenders are not tax compliant. The Revenue Service also says that it is a basic and essential requirement that all companies who are awarded government-related work have to be tax compliant. According to SARS, many of the tenders for PPEs were awarded to companies and people who are politically connected. President Cyril Ramaphosa announced recently that all PPE and Covid-19 relief-related contracts should be investigated to ensure transparency due to allegations of corruption that surfaced. Edward Kieswetter, the Commissioner at the South African Revenue Service, joins us now to talk about this. Commissioner, thanks for your time, as always, and joining us here on Morning Live.
Good morning, Leanne. You well?
I am, but reading this introduction has sort of ruined my day a little bit, I have to say. I'm sure your day's been ruined too when this all came to light. I mean, 63% of these companies are not tax compliant. Please explain to us a little more detail how it came to light that so many of these companies actually got these contracts and they're not tax compliant.
Let me just step back. That number has changed subsequently because it's a growing number. So for context, from the analysis we have, there were just more than 30,000 entities that were awarded PPE contracts. We are busy profiling all of those. And it is true that a significant number of these companies were not fully tax compliant. So let me give you an example. Of just over 13,000 of those entities that we could identify, we are still looking for VAT registration number for almost 12,000 of them. Now, a company who does business, certainly in this industry, one would expect to be registered for VAT. That would allow them to claim their input VAT from us, because on the sale they would charge VAT. And so when you realize that such a high number of these companies are actually not registered for VAT, it's concerning, because if you assume that just at 15% VAT, these companies would have paid VAT, it's a significant number, over 500 million of potential tax revenue loss just on that one number.
Wow.
So it is concerning. Many of these companies who are registered for VAT have submitted no returns and have not fully disclosed the value of their PPE contracts. One would have expected that some of them would pay a provisional payment in the last round. And so many of them have not done that. So I think the message, if you step away from the numbers, the message that is concerning is that there are still significant numbers of companies who have entered the procurement system of government, who have derived benefit from them, legally or otherwise. So let's assume that even those who obtained it in a proper procurement process, they still, after having benefited from government, are not honouring their tax obligation. And that's the concern we raise.
And that is the concern, because, I mean, even I've heard you coming out and saying during numerous interviews, and here even speaking to us, that South Africans have a right to be angry about corruption, but you still urge them to pay taxes and be law-abiding. But then you see these instances where it's friends of government officials that are getting awarded PPEs for millions and tens of millions of rands that are not even VAT registered, that pay not a single cent of tax. And then you think to yourself, well, why am I doing it? I'm working hard for my money. Why should I bother doing this? And that's where the anger comes in. And I mean, I'm already seeing, and obviously this is because of the numbers that obviously we were in a lockdown. It just shows you how badly hit South Africa was, that from August, where we had the collections coming in, you yourself announced that it's 103 billion rand down in tax collections. So, this is a great worry. But add the corruption in and just the PPEs, add 500 million to that number would have been less.
And that's the sad reality. And I have been consistently saying, as you quite rightly point out, Leanne, that we must be careful. Whilst I understand and accept the disenchantment and often disgust of South Africans when they see the high levels of corruption, the high levels of inefficiency, that they may feel morally justified to withhold their taxes. But I also say you are hurting the wrong people when you withhold your taxes, firstly, because the beneficiaries of the tax system are vulnerable people. It's the frontline workers. It's the old lady who depends on her social old age grant. It's the young mother who would be destitute without this money. That's what inspires us to get up and do our work. So that's the first message for anyone who thinks that they are justified to withhold their taxes. The second reason is, if you permit one crime, whether it is because of what you may think righteous rage, then you open up a system of lawlessness. And then if one crime, however you may justify it, you must accept that others will find their own justification for committing other crimes. And so I would always be a guardian of a law-abiding society and speak out against any form of corruption and any form of lawlessness.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, these are the right sentiments and things to say, but it's hard when examples are not being set from the top, and that is the big problem. Let's just get back to these companies now. Were there no audits done before on the companies prior to awarding them the contracts? Isn't that illegal to hand them a contract without an audit being done?
So first of all, Leanne, you would recall that when we reported to Scopa 2 weeks ago, I said that we need to strengthen the tax compliant system within SARS, because we find that certain companies abuse it, they manipulate it. So, for example, if you have to, one of the checks that we would perform before we issue a status certificate is whether you have submitted your returns that are outstanding. And so what we would find is that a company, if they know they have to put in a tender, they submit a return, but they put in a null return, they put a fraudulent return, an incorrectly disclosed return to get past that question. And then it is only on a subsequent audit that we would find out that actually the return may have been submitted, but it was not correct. Sure. And so we also have stated in Parliament that that's one of the areas of work that requires attention by us, and we intend to do so.
Yeah. So is there any way of getting this back in terms of tracking them down and recovering the tax that is owed by these companies?
So the good news is that one of the instruments in law that SARS has is to issue a preservation order, which would, when we have made our assessment of the tax that is due, in order to make sure that monies don't flow out of the company, we issue a preservation order. In fact, we are keenly awaiting one of the matters that is coming to court today of such a preservation order. The court it will be heard at 10 o'clock this morning. And we are confident that we need to protect the interest of the fiscus in that regard. And so that's one of the things we do. Once we have, we've also, as of the beginning of this week, we have completed 63 audits, and with that raised additional revenue. And that there's a number of audits in process. And by our initial assessment, again, you're talking of hundreds of millions of additional revenue that we would assess. So the first thing we do is we go back and we do a full investigation to check the compliance of these companies who were favored. Secondly, we look to see if there are any incomplete registrations. We engage with them to make sure they are appropriately registered. We raise the additional taxes where taxes are due. We invoke the instruments such as preservation orders, or our first engagement will be to ask people to pay it, in a amicable way to settle it. And we don't always assume the worst. However, we then also hand these over to our criminal investigation division, who then would do further investigation to see if there was any criminal behavior. And then we work with our colleagues in SAPS, the SIU, the Hawks, and the NPA to make sure that these cases are brought to book. And we are currently engaged in 3 matters that we've already had handed over to the NPA for further investigation and potential prosecution, and another 12 or so matters that are potentially ready to be handed over. So I think the assurance we want to give to South Africans is that we will leave no stone unturned, firstly by speaking out and by exposing the fact that there is corruption and procurement irregularities. Secondly, by doing the work we do, and thankfully we also are increasing our work of data-driven artificial intelligence so that we're able to process more of these faster and to detect non-compliance easier. We will continue to do this work, and we will leave no stone unturned, firstly, to ensure tax compliance, secondly, to make sure the revenue that is due is collected, and thirdly, where there is criminal behavior, to ensure that those operators are brought to book.
Indeed. I have to ask you a question, though. This tender system, you're jogging my memory, and while you've been chatting, I've been going into my emails because I have been receiving now, and this is I don't know if anybody else does this, because one of the blatant things that has been revealed that we mentioned, and you've spoken to the fact that most of those who receive the tenders have absolutely no experience in tenders, in any form of PPE business. So that I'm going to say up front. So now I've been thinking about this, and I've been looking at my private email, and I have been getting emails. Now, obviously, I have done work for government, but that's in terms of, events, talking, facilitation, things like that, and had to go and submit 4 million papers and sign documents and do everything that I have to. Now, lately, I have been getting emails to tender for, as I looked on there, I've been asked to tender for wheelchairs, sanitizers, dry cleaning machines, and face shields. I, in my private capacity, have been asked to tender for these for tens of millions of rands. And I've been looking at this and thinking, how is this possible that me, where I have filled out every form, I've given all of my documentation, they know exactly what I specialize in, and yet I'm being asked to tender for PPE. How is this possible?
I didn't know you were moonlighting.
Neither did I. So this is
that's the kind of information I think we would love to lay our hands on. So please feel free to send it to us.
I will.
Therein lies
I'll forward these to
an
you.
Efficiency that we need to address. So the sad thing, even if you park the tax and criminal offences, and not everyone that supplies goods and services to government are crooks. Let me say that up front. There are honest brokers who are bona fide providers who do so honestly and without whose services government cannot exist. But it is also a huge opportunity for abuse, and which abuse is then further exacerbated if those of us on the side of government are not diligent. And if you receive invites like that, and what we find, and hence our earlier statement that there are registered bakeries, car washing companies, property letting companies, and now I can add to that list media presenters who will find themselves in this fray. So what people do is they interpose third and fourth and fifth parties. They have no experience. They procure and unprovide, and they interpose themselves for no other reason than just siphoning off value out of the system. And you then find examples of PPE goods and items that are grossly under standards, and which, as we have heard, allegedly may have contributed towards the death of frontline workers because it's substandard. Secondly, you find goods and services provide 3 to 5 times the value of a reasonable price. And so these are some of the practices that manifest that places our society at risk, that causes significant revenue leakages, and that just makes our society sick to the core.
Yeah.
And one wants to cry, because ultimately that's money that is stolen from the poor and the most vulnerable. And if you're a civil servant, if you're someone like me who are employed to serve the interests of those people, and you abuse your position, or you allow impropriety, shame on you.
Indeed.
We cannot stand for that.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. We have to leave it there, but I'm glad to get your answer. I'm going to send these emails to you. You have a look at them and you tell me what you think. SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter talking to us about 63% of companies awarded PPE government tenders who are not tax compliant. And people like me, I mean, so can you believe it? I mean, as I'm talking, the visual is coming back in my mind, because I've been ignoring them and thinking, but then I'm thinking, hang on, me, am being asked to tender for wheelchairs. In fact, I've opened up the email now, and it was something that is meant to be happening today. On Thursday, the 10th of September, the successful bidder will deliver on or before Wednesday, the 9th, and it's for wheelchairs. And this was particularly valued. It's robot, Peabot wheelchairs, something or other, 10 units valued at R1 million. 10 wheelchairs at R1 million sent to me that I must tender for it.
If you want to tell me off air, I'm happy to listen.
Yeah, I'm going to show you.
I'm sure there's something you are doing that you're not telling us about. But listen, as you say, it's a valid question, because when you and I when we are asked to submit invoices, they ask you for a tax clearance certificate.
I must fill out about 15 different forms, and rightly so, and I'm happy to do that. So because everything is above board. You fill out what your service is, what you're doing, making sure that you're tax compliant and all of that, and they know what service we're offering. And then I get to ask to tender for hand sanitizers, face shields, and wheelchairs.
But you see, the point about being tax compliant is very important, because you and I cannot get a gig with government if we are not tax compliant.
Not at all.
So how then did you actually manage to issue tenders to people worth millions and hundreds of millions of rand if they are not tax compliant?
Amazing. Yeah. Right, quickly, let's get some tweets.